Hello, I'm Jason Steelman. I'm one of the developers on the Sims initiatives. We are a digital humanities project at the University of South Carolina with funding from the Watson Brown Foundation. In celebration of Halloween and to promote our site, we are reading one of William Gilmore Sims' ghost stories throughout the month of October. Grayling, or Murder Will Out, is part of the author's short story collection, The Wigwam and the Cabin, and this is part 2 of this exciting tale. The Revolutionary War had but a little been concluded. The British had left the country, but peace did not imply repose. The community was still in that state of ferment, which was natural enough to passions not yet at rest, which had been wrought into exercise and action during the protracted 7 years' struggle through which the nation had just passed. The state was overrun by idlers, adventurers, profligates, and criminals. Disbanded soldiers, half-starved recklers occupied the highways. Outlaws emerging from their hiding places skulked about the settlements with an equal sentiment of hate and fear in their hearts. Patriots were clamoring for justice upon the Tories, and sometimes anticipating its course by judgments of their own, while the Tories, against whom the proofs were too strong for denial or evasion, buckled on their own armor for a renewal of the struggle. Such being the condition of the country, it may easily be supposed that life and property lacked many of the necessary securities. Men generally traveled with weapons which were displayed on the smallest provocation, and few who could provide themselves with an escort ventured to travel any distance without one. There was, about this time, said my grandmother, and while such was the condition of the country, a family of the name of Grayling that lived somewhere upon the skirts of 96th District. Old Grayling, the head of the family, was dead. He was killed in Buford's massacre. His wife was a fine woman, not so very old, who had only one son named James, and a little girl, only 5 years of age, named Lucy. James was but 14 when his father was killed, and that event made a man of him. When he went out with his rifle in company of Joel Sparkman, who was his mother's brother, and joined himself to Pickens' brigade. Here he made as good a soldier as the best. He had no sort of fear. He was always the first to go forward, and his rifle was always good for his enemy's baton at a long 100 yards. He was even in several fights with the Britons and the Tories. And just before the war was ended, he had a famous brush with the Cherokees when Pickens took their country from them. But though he had no fear and never knew when to stop killing while the fight was going on, he was the most bashful of boys that I ever knew, and so kind-hearted that it was almost impossible to believe we heard of his fierce doings while he was in battle. But they were nevertheless quite true for all of his bashfulness. Well, when the war was over, Joel Sparkman, who lived with his sister Grayling, persuaded her that it would be better to move down into the low country. I don't know what the reason he had for it or what they proposed to do there. They had very little property, but Sparkman was a knowing man. He could turn his hands into 100 things, and he was a bachelor and loved his sister and children, just as if they were his own. It was natural that she go with him wherever he wished. James, too, was a restless by nature, and the taste he had enjoyed in the wars had made him more so. He was full of it, and so, one Sunday morning, their wagon started for the city. The wagon was only a small one, with 2 horses scarcely larger than those that are employed to carry chickens or fruit to the market, from Wasama's to thereabouts. It was driven by a Negro fellow named Clytus, and carried Miss Grayling and Lucy. James and his uncle loved the saddle too well to shut themselves up in a vehicle, and both of them were mounted on fine horses, which they had won from the enemy. The saddle that James rode on, and he was very proud of it, was one he had taken for the battle at Cowpens from one of the Tarleton's own dragoons, after he had tumbled the owner. And this has been part 2 of William Gilmore Sims' Grayling, or Murder Will Out. I hope you tune in next time for another reading of this ghostly tale. Or, if you'd like to read the full text or any of our many other works that we have available, simply visit the Sims Initiative's website at sims.library.sc.edu. Until then, have a happy Halloween.